What was the worst case of parents pushing their dreams onto their children you have seen? Parents of a 12-year-old boy envisioned him becoming a concert pianist and brought him to me for lessons. He had been taking lessons previously with a different teacher, but it wasn't going anywhere. I asked him what his dreams were, what was of interest to him. It was clear that he liked the piano a lot, but becoming a professional pianist was his parents' vision for his future, not his. His folks kept pushing, forcing him to practice more hours and to stay focused almost entirely on learning new pieces, to the point where at one lesson he broke into tears and said he liked learning music, but couldn't stand the pressure from his parents anymore. At that point I interceded on his behalf and explained that they were driving him away from music rather than drawing him to it. Thankfully, they heeded my advice and stopped lessons until such time as he might decide for himself to resume, which, I'm happy to report, he did. Now, he plays beautifully and very relaxed. I used to play on a lot of soccer teams when I was a kid, maybe from 6 years old to about 14 or so, and this kid's dad used to always show up to his games and yell at the ref about calls being made about his kid and shit like that. He yells at his son to run faster and work harder, but when his son fucks up somewhere it's either his son is a failure or the ref is picking on his son. You know the type. Anyways, one day, when I was about 13 or 14, this kid showed up with his dad and started stretching with the rest of us, but he looked tired as hell. We asked him what was up but barely got an audible grunt before his dad ran toward him and asked him if he wanted his drink. About 20 minutes after drinking this drink, the kid was bouncing all over the place and looked like he was ready to play 20 games. About halfway through the game the kid's dad was yelling and screaming as usual and the kid goes to kick the ball then ends up on the ground. We were all wondering what the hell happened. His dad ran up and started yelling as usual and getting bad, blaming the other kid on the other team for going after the ball at the same time. I mean, the whole point of playing a game is to win, right? He ended up being carried away on a cart from an ambulance and we didn't hear from him for a while. About 3 games later, and we see him on the sidelines with a cast on his leg and his dad looking pissed with his mom next to his dad and giving him stern looks. Turns out his dad had been giving his kid caffeine pills to boost his energy and making him practice hardcore at home, and in doing this, he strained his leg too much to the point of him tearing his ACL due to the increased stress, combined with his recklessness of the caffeine. We all felt hella bad for him, but his mom was fucking pissed at the dad. Reamed him out hardcore anytime he was about to speak up to the ref and tell him how to do his job. She apparently had no idea what her son was going through, and the dad used to be some huge soccer star and was about to go pro or something. Never saw him much after that. The mom ended up going to the games with him after his leg healed up, but he could never play professionally anymore due to that injury. Last I heard from that kid is he grew up and is going to school for pharmacology or something, so good for him. This doesn't exactly answer the question, but it's close enough, and I really want to tell this story. I dated a guy in college who told me that if we got married, we'd have to use an egg donor to have kids because I'm short. You see, if his kids ended up being shorter than 6'3", it would be harder for them to become professional athletes. Being professional athletes was the only acceptable career choice for his future sons. Of course he wouldn't have any daughters. How absurd. That relationship didn't last. I feel bad for his future kids. When I was a kid at the chess club there was another kid there. He started school at 8 AM. Then he sang in a choir. After that it was football. Then chess. After that home to do homework. We usually finished around 9 PM. Having 1-2 hours worth of homework wasn't unusual. All his days were something like that. He didn't even get to play himself. His grandma, who only knew how the pieces moved and nothing about strategy, sat there telling him what to do. She didn't even attempt to explain why she thought it was a good move. Just do it. I started getting more and more annoyed at her. I wanted to play with her grandson, not Mrs. Do everything I say without question or explanation. He played a lot better when grandma wasn't there. She acted really offended when I told her to let him play, shut up for a few moves, and then she was at it again. Eventually he quit everything except school. I kept hoping that he'd show up at the chess club without grandma, but I understand why he didn't. As a coach for Little League softball, my team was 10U at the time. We had this one dad who just insisted that his daughter be a pitcher. She was honestly one of our best infielders, so we played her at second base, and she liked that position. She was a decent pitcher but much preferred being at second base, and we had 2 other girls that were better pitchers. Dad wasn't happy about that, and I didn't see her next season. I hoped he got over it. She liked softball and had a knack for it, but dad was about to ruin it for her by forcing her to pitch. A friend of mine works in Broadway productions and has seen some monstrous stage moms. When he was working on Mary Poppins, one stage mom would buy a seat and sit there taking notes on her kid's performance to grill him on later. She also dragged the kid to all sorts of acting classes, dance classes, etc. The kid had no social skills and no friends. My friend now works on a show with no kids in the cast. I had a freshman student tell me to not get mad if her mom angrily emails nonstop this school year. The poor kid loves history and wants to be archaeologists when he grows up. But his mom wants him to follow the family footsteps and be a lawyer. His mom has already yelled at the counselor for putting him in basic general ed classes and not in government or law classes. I sent the kid home with some archaeology books after he told me his mom makes him read law books before bed. I work at an ice cream place and this one lady came in and was telling her daughter that she had to have the strawberry sorbet, our only non-dairy/vegan product, and I asked her was she lactose intolerant, and the mom said oh no she isn't, but I am, and we have to match. The little child says, but mommy I don't wanna match, I wanna get bubble gum. This is when it got weird. The lady just started screaming at this poor child, well my mom made me have the sorbets, so you can only have these 2. The child is crying, and the mom is just like just get us 2 strawberry sorbets please, and she just keeps yelling at her. I cash them out, and she is half yelling at her child and half talking to me like nothing is happening. We live in the South and football is huge here. My son is teammates with a kid who was held back as an 8th grader. He wasn't held back because of grades, but to give him more time to develop before high school ball. He just transferred to my kid's middle school this year, but my son said that it's pretty obvious the kid doesn't love football. He is good to it because he has been training for years now, but he doesn't really enjoy it. He's also the 5th child in his family and the only boy. Part of me thinks his dad kept having kids until he got the boy he wanted, so he could groom him into a football player. I went to high school with a guy who was, according to people who knew him, very sweet and not at all conceited. He had played baseball and football from a very young age and his dad was super controlling about how he trained, what he did to further train once he got home, his food, etc. He couldn't even have a girlfriend because it was a distraction from his training, and his dad wanted him to be scouted by big colleges, etc. His dad had been a big shot high school quarterback or something who considered his life ruined when he got his wife pregnant with their oldest son, the one who he was being so hard on. Christmas break of our senior year, the dude snapped and shot his father to death. This guy I went to middle/high school with had a father who wanted his son to be the right answer to JFK, sort of a Rush Limbaugh type who could win political offices. He spent all of his free time going to NRA shooting competitions, and every activity he had to be the captain or he would quit. Also, on everything political he would have a really witty response, you know, like yeah well my gun has killed less people than Ted Kennedy, or I lasted longer than the French. His dad also held him a year back, so he would be bigger and stronger than everyone else in the class, which just made him a douche. He was supposed to go to college and be both the student body president and captain of the shooting team. Instead he promptly changed to a different college and quit shooting. Interesting fellow really. For a little bit I was working as a flight instructor. Let me preface this with flying isn't for everyone. Often the students I had either came from money or their parents were pilots themselves. One particular student of mine just had no business being behind the controls of a plane. He didn't know east from west. He couldn't look out the window and ballpark a distance. On one occasion we were about a minute from a nose-to-nose collision with another small aircraft. I pointed it out to him. He looked at the other plane and kinda did a this is my life now sort of thing until I took the controls. Anyways, I couldn't continue giving him lessons because he just didn't want to be there. His goal was to be an officer in the army. We had a sit down talk about me discontinuing his course and he started crying and pouting. Turns out his dad was a pilot and told him if he goes into the army he has to fly helicopters and the private pilot's certificate would help him get there. 19 years old and in tears. That date sucked. He quit flying for good after our talk. I think he made it to officer school though. Someone in my A level, 16 to 18, chemistry class really did not want to be there. She was extremely intelligent, I think had a learning difficulty, and had full understanding of the material, but had no interest in it at all. Some of the class picked on her because of it, and once ended up causing a laboratory accident with her as the victim. She still came to class afterward, though now with glasses. She got permanent eye damage from the accident and the lecturer did not have eye washing the laboratory, which is well illegal, but she was even more disinterested. Talked to her once when meeting her by chance in the library between classes. Turns out that both her dad and stepmother were in the sciences, biochemist, and doctor, and her siblings had moved out. So the parents pushed everything onto her, after noticing her very good science grades at XL level. Decided her future for her basically, whether she liked it or not. Straight into mathematics, biology, and chemistry and A-level, extra tuition classes after college and 12 hours a day on Saturday and Sunday. She knew what she was talking about, and had a very good grasp at sciences. She was so good at biology she once taught her class about nerves, when the teacher stepped out, because the teacher hadn't explained it clearly enough. Her parents wanted her to go on to either getting a degree in biochemistry, or in a medical field. But she hated it. However, she loved history, and would sneakily research it between classes. Want to know a list of Chinese emperors from the 12th century to the fall of Imperial China? She'll quote them to you in order with all of their reign dates. Want to know about Welsh class churches? She could detail you where several were built, and what saint they were based around. What were some of the events leading up to the death of Thomas Becket? She could give you several potential reasons why someone would have wanted him dead. You wanted to know history, she was the one to go to. Lost contact with her after passing college, but we came back into contact a couple of years ago. Managed to get away from her dad and stepmother, gained freedom to do what she wanted. She has now a degree from the London-based School of African and Oriental Studies, speaks 4 languages and works in translating historical documents in museums. My cousin was really into snowboarding when he was younger, and his rich father went a little overboard and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on the snowboarding lifestyle, going as far as buying a cottage that was next to a ski hill. My cousin went semi-pro and had sponsorships from different snowboard brands and his own team. His father was pushing him to go for an Olympic team, but he finally admitted that he just wanted to continue snowboarding as a casual hobby and couldn't see himself going pro. His father was furious and made claims that his son was ruining his life and making the wrong choice, and that he would never succeed outside of snowboarding. Crazy rich people. Born deaf and my right ear hearing loss in my left that wasn't really usable by the time of late middle school to high school. My parents chose to mainstream me with the backing of doctor recommendations, who are not education specialists by the way. Severely bullied and isolated. My brother would not spend time with me. My parents, with the doctors, decided to give me prednisone, which is a steroid, while I was still in puberty. I turned out to suffer a lot of anger and extreme emotions during that time. I still lost hearing. Then they decided to treat me with Cetirizine, which is a chemo drug, and was used based on the recommendation of a Drive, Rowland, and Drive, Weinthal, oncology. I had 6 treatments of it for 8 hours each. I was perfectly healthy and this was experimental to try and stop my hearing loss. Been through rehab, seen people self-harm and do fucked up shit. I've been severely depressed and suicidal at times. I lost out socially and emotionally in this world in so many ways because my family wanted me to act as a hearing person, not as a deaf person using sign. That was their dream, their ideal for me. We do not talk much now. Family I used to work with basically ignored their 2 daughters to focus on their son. Dad jokes that he made his wife have 3 kids because they needed a son. He was a mediocre football player in middle school. No one in his family was very big. The dad sold the family house and they moved into a trailer home so that they could afford these expensive private lessons and camps for the kid. The two daughters had to share a room in a trailer, eventually got involved in sports because they needed to be out of the house, were on our state champ soccer team. Never a bit of attention. They might as well not have existed. They fed that kid special meals, so he was always training, and dad coached his every workout. He did end up getting on the JV team, but basically didn't make varsity because he was too small and the dad was too aggressive. It was excruciating to watch. The family had been referred to social services several times because the girls were basically on their own and the dad was so aggressive with the son. The mom eventually had some kind of breakdown. One of the many reasons I hate football and sports for kids specifically. It was in the South, so people were constantly defending this dude. Todd Mirinovic. His father legitimately bred him for football. Insane diets, no refined sugar, no refined flour, and exercise from almost the day he was born, with the intention of making him a No. 1 draft pick. Of course, Todd had his demons, becoming addicted to heroin and cocaine, all while bouncing around from the NFL to the CFL to anywhere that would take him. I believe he was most recently arrested earlier this year for meth possession. Sad story. Friend's mum was the typical pushy type, A** student all the way, all set to go study maths while continuing to play in National Orchestra. 6 AM train journey every weekend. Her close friend took her life, so she balked and realized that she had to do what made her happy and told her mum that she wasn't going to study maths. Changed subjects but still went to one of the most prestigious universities in the UK. She was home within 6 months having a breakdown, yet the mum still continued to push her, dragging her back to uni. Eventually she cracked, came home, moved out of her parents, and took the rest of the year to take care of herself. She's now in a college studying something she really enjoys and continues to make progress.